Hey guys, it's the Melblade 5, and by now I'm sure that everybody has gathered that I make a lot of mistakes from time to time. So much so that I've already made 2 countdowns on this subject, but since making those videos I have made more mistakes. Some of which are pretty freaking embarrassing, or have realized more errors I've made in previous videos to the point that I feel a 3rd countdown is warranted, seeing as how obvious some of them are. I can't even say pigeon properly, so what do you expect? So as I've already gone over this twice before, and since I'd imagine that most people watching have seen the previous 2, this intro will be very short by comparison. Simply put, this is a video covering the biggest mistakes that I have made or realized since the previous countdowns, and of course, none of the mistakes I've already covered in the first 2 countdowns will be repeated here. Additionally, any mistakes that I have already stated or corrected outright in other videos will not be covered. Lastly, for any mistakes that aren't covered in this list or the previous ones, that's simply because I had deemed them to not be as major compared to the mistakes that did make the list. It's not necessarily me being stubborn and thinking I was right, because as I said in the top 10 favorite female characters list, I'm known to be very hard on myself when I notice that I make a mistake. But now that my forehead is fully prepared for the facepalms to come, here is yet another top 10 fuck-ups list. Silvally isn't a mythical Pokemon. I don't know if this came from a lack of research or just hindsight, but it's pretty glaring for anybody watching back on the video where I said this. In my response to Felicify's top 10 most disappointing Sun and Moon Pokemon, my primary counter-argument to his arguments made about Silvally being disappointing due to being a discount Arceus was that Silvally was the closest to being Arceus without being a mythical Pokemon because of its stats. However, months later, I was watching Aura Guardian's video on the weakest legendary Pokemon, where I discovered that Game Freak actually stated that Silvally is not only a mythical Pokemon, it's straight up a legendary. This makes my entire counter-argument mute, as I had the assumption that Silvally was classed as a regular Pokemon, just with lots of lore and plot relevance, which was wrong. I don't know why it has the stats it does, considering that it's supposed to be a legendary, but it does admittedly make me agree with Felicify's points about it more. I don't know if Silvally's status was confirmed prior to making my video, which is why this error is only number 10, as I couldn't have known at the time, but the uncertainty also means that it could have been stated before and I just didn't realize it. Pokémon Pronunciations. This isn't so much about me getting pronunciations wrong, although that is part of it, but more so to do with me getting mad at other people pronouncing them wrong. In my response to Watch Mojo's top 10 Pokemon movies, a recurring trend was that I called them out for mispronouncing the names of some of the Pokemon in the video. At the time, my reasoning for this was that while I'm fine with personalized YouTube channels pronouncing things however they want, hell, I do that all the time, due to them being, well, personalized, it bothered me when a more objectively focused channel that's supposed to be professional pronounces things wrong, like IGN and Watch Mojo, since the latter is very objective in its presentation and arguments in videos. But not only did I not make that point very clear, making it seem like I was against anybody who mispronounces Pokemon names, over time I also started to change my stance on that and felt pretty stupid for going on about it so dramatically. I didn't even think it was a major issue with the video at the time, I only threw it in there because it bothered me. Because I don't view mispronouncing names as such a big deal, despite some people manipulating my words to make it appear otherwise. It was also very hypocritical for me to make a note on that, seeing as how, in the video itself, I mispronounced the Pokemon's name. Arceus. I knew that the way you're supposed to say it is Arceus, or possibly Arceus now, both of which I was never a fan of, so I've always chosen to call it by what I've said for most of my time knowing this Pokemon's existence. But I should have known it wouldn't look good for me to mispronounce a name after getting on Watch Mojo's case over it. Also, while this is off topic, if I could just clarify one thing, I actually don't mind Watch Mojo nowadays, since I think that they've added a lot more personality to their videos, especially the ones with the guests. Theory mistakes. This isn't related to one video, but 2, both of which were theory videos that I felt pretty embarrassed about but didn't think were big enough separately to cover in one entry, so I decided to put them together. The first of these 2 videos, in relation to when they were uploaded, was my theory on Yu-Gi-Oh! Holograms and how they can interact with duelists as if they were real. In the very first episode of the original series, Kaiba mentions that the monsters displayed are holograms.
It's my virtual simulator. It creates lifelike holograms of every duel monster.
But that's only in the English dub, as far as I'm aware. It never crossed my mind for me to look at the original Japanese dialogue, since my only experience with the original series at that point was with the dub from when I was growing up. Now, I've never been able to find this scene in Japanese, but one day when I was bored, I decided to watch a video of Kaiba's duel against Siegfried that I came across, which was in Japanese, and during Siegfried's backstory dump, you see that Kaiba pitched his holographic technology as being along the lines of hyper-realistic. So they actually do explain it in the anime, which made the entire theory completely pointless. The second theory was my Mega Man theory, pitching the idea that classic Mega Man and X were one and the same. But not long after I made that video, somebody commented on it and quoted a statement made by a Capcom employee, which outright said that X was a completely different entity to classic Mega Man, which also made the theory completely pointless, as the only thing preventing that quote coming from the voice of God was if Keiji Inafune said it. But still, the theory videos just ended up being redundant and completely wrong respectively, as there had already been information out there that provided the definitive answer to the questions that led me towards making those theories in the first place. Forgotten Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Voice actors / roles. I made a video about how the anime for Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Share so many voice actors, and after uploading it, I myself realized that I missed some voice actors, and some roles for the voice actors I did mention, in addition to people in the comments informing me of even more. So for this entry, I'm pretty much going quick fire on all the ones I know I missed. First off, as I noted in a comment, there's Veronica Taylor, Ash and May's original voice actress, who also voiced Carly in 5Ds, but then I found out she also voiced Miss Dorothy in GX. Additionally, I also discovered that Sarah Natacheni, Ash's current voice actress, played Aura in Arc 5. And one voice actor I saw frequently brought up in the comments was Lisa Ortiz, who voiced Amy in Sonic X, and by extension all the Sonic games that use the 4Kids cast, since she voiced Joey's sister Serenity in the original series before appearing in Pokemon as Corrina in the XY series. For some of the roles I missed for actors I covered in the video, the one I knew straight away was Crow, since I used Bulbapedia as my primary source for the video, seeing as how I'd never seen Bulbapedia be wrong prior to this, and it has pages on most of the actors I covered in the video, where it said that Jason Griffith voiced him. But then as I did additional research, I found out that Jason Griffith doesn't voice him, so I had to cut out the part where I said it was him. I was also misinformed, but from Wikipedia years ago, that Dan Green also voiced Ash's Grovyle, which I also had to cut from the video, and then I found out it was actually voiced by Darren Dunstan, who is Pegasus in Yu-Gi-Oh! Another role I soon realized I forgot was that Sean Schemmel also voiced Professor Viper in GX, and then someone in the comments also informed me that he voiced Clay in the Black and White series. Furthermore, I found out that Wayne Grayson voiced Harrison in Pokemon, and as many people told me, which just slipped my mind when making the video, Dan Green voiced Mewtwo in Mewtwo Returns. And just before ending off this video, someone told me that Megan Hollingshead, or however you say it, Mai's original voice actress, was also the original voice of Nurse Joy and Cassidy, before presenting a huge list of many others. And finally, although this might not be an error, I may have gotten one role wrong. As I was using Bulbapedia as my main source, I was told that Haven Pascal, Serena, voiced Grace Tyler in Arc 5, but then the Yu-Gi-Oh! Wiki told me that Grace was instead voiced by Allison Lee Rosenfield. I saw slightly more sources claiming the former, which is why I stuck with it in the video. Now, I have listened to Grace's English voice, and it does sound a bit like Serena to me.
Welcome to Team Yuya.
But that could just be my ears playing tricks on me. Surprise at the Rogue One deaths. This is probably one of the errors that people picked up on very early. In my response to Nostalgia Critic's Rogue One review, near the end of the video when they were covering the climax, I mentioned how I was surprised at all the deaths at the end, which I'm pretty sure everybody is aware of at this point, which is why I didn't put up a spoiler warning. But some people questioned why I was so surprised, seeing as how they felt it was pretty obvious that they were going to die, and that came as a result of me not wording that part of the video very well to get my point across. Before I saw Rogue One, I myself even guessed that there would be deaths, to explain why some of the characters don't appear in Episode 4. It's just that I wasn't expecting every single member of Rogue One to die, especially not by Death Star blast for Jyn and Cassian. That's what I was referring to at that part of the video, so not only did it sound like almost the opposite of how I actually reacted to the ending of Rogue One, but what's worse is that in the similar vein to the Shadow of Memories fuck-up, I kind of noticed that I wasn't super clear during editing, but at the time I thought that it wasn't a super big deal and didn't detract that much away from the overall video. Oh, how wrong I was! As well, it didn't affect the remaining video that much. It did give off the impression that I was a dumb Star Wars super nerd that objects to all criticism any of the movies receive, at least to me when I look back on it. I may like some movies that everybody else hates, but even in those cases I'll admit their flaws. And when the entire video is about presenting personal issues with a mostly negative review, that isn't the kind of impression that you want to give off. So, you see, if I poorly word something in a video, then I'll admit it. I've done that plenty of times elsewhere, meaning that when people straight up twist my words, I argue against it. Android 18's energy absorption error. This is more of an error in the sense of personal matters and beliefs rather than being an outright mistake I made in the video. But it's something that I've wanted to address for a long time. In the death battle between Android 18 and Captain Marvel, one of the major arguments why 18 won was that she could absorb energy and thus learn to stop using energy attacks, and to use it herself to grow stronger. However, Android 18 can only use energy absorption in the Xenoverse games, whilst in the manga and anime she is stated to be unable to do that. This is what I used to counter the argument in my response to the battle, as it went against DFL's rules of not using information that goes against canon sources. But after I uploaded the video, I gradually started to receive comments containing a link, which initially I didn't click at first, seeing as how I have to mess around with YouTube's system always holding comments with links for review. When I did click on one of these links though, it took me to Ben Singer's Twitter page and towards a tweet he made which included a video where he states that he learned that 18 can't absorb energy in the canon Dragon Ball material and apologized for there being incorrect information in the battle. Ben was already aware of this error by the time I made my response, which honestly makes me feel terrible for arguing against it. When I'm making a response video, I don't like to point out any mistakes or incorrect information that the video's creator is already aware of because I see it as kicking them when they're down. This is the reason why, unlike commentators, I actually bothered to check the comments to see if the creator has acknowledged any errors or clarified some points that I can prevent this from occurring. It's also the reason why I refuse to respond to videos that the creator no longer agrees with or regrets making, and why I really dislike it when people do that anyway. Unfortunately, Ben's statement was only posted on Twitter, and since I don't use Twitter, I was unaware of it until it was too late. Which you could argue may not make this an error, as I didn't know, but for one, it's still something that I feel really bad for doing, and second is that before making my response, I came across quite a number of videos where the mistake with 18's supposed energy absorption was a major talking point, and I barely looked at the comments to potentially see if anybody had linked Ben's tweet there. I've been beating myself up over this ever since I discovered it, and knowing this makes me feel far less worthy of having Ben tweet one of my videos. Questioning cartoon Fight Club matchups. This was another error that a lot of people picked on very quickly. In my response to Cartoon Fight Club, there was a section in which I went over a bunch of matchups that I thought made little or no sense. It appears that everybody agreed with some of the ones I brought up, as there were some where people didn't point out if I was wrong or not, while for others I was told of a connection I was unaware of. The one I got the most was about Robin versus Leonardo, because whenever I think of Robin, I only think of him as Batman's sidekick, and completely forgot about the Teen Titans, in which the fact that Robin and Leonardo are both the leaders of teenage superhero teams was the intended connection. A lot of people also told me that Rosalina vs. Silver was done because when they pitted the Mario and Sonic casts against each other, they were the only ones absent, so it was intended as a continuation of that, which admittedly I don't think is a very good reason, but knowing that beforehand would have allowed me to address it. And then there were the ones that were intended to be the ones that made little sense to me. To clarify, that means the ones where I did notice a connection but felt that the connection was very minimal. One of these was Mario vs. the Ninja Turtles, where initially I had no idea why they were pitted against each other, but then realized that it was going off of how Mario constantly jumps on Koopas and the Ninja Turtles are, well, also turtles. But I thought that wasn't really a similarity between Mario himself and the Ninja Turtles, in which I thought that the latter fighting against the Koopa Bros would make more sense as it's obvious they're based on the Turtles. The other one that also fell under this category was Sans and Papyrus versus Mario and Luigi, since I got that the connection was that they're brothers, but found it to be so minimal to the point that you could do a ton of different matchups with that exact same connection. However, with both of those matchups, nobody realized that I was talking about the matchups with little sense, despite bringing that up in the video, but that was a result of me not being very clear with it, and not outright saying that those last two matchups were the ones where I knew the reasoning, but thought it was minuscule rather than it appearing to be me just not understanding at all. But with Robin versus Leonardo and Rosalina versus Silva, that was just me not knowing anything at all at the time. So I ended up looking really stupid. But not as much as one of the later entries did. My treatment of Anita Sarkeesian. I can imagine this being a very controversial entry just because it involves me regretting being a jerk to Anita Sarkeesian of all people, but it's something that's been haunting me ever since I made that video. In my first response to the Tropes vs. Women in Video Games series, I had acted very spiteful and rude to Anita for no good reason, where on several occasions in the video I told her to fuck off, and at the end, after my intentionally loud freak out to be funny and vent out my frustration on her contradicting herself, I called her a bitch. Yeah, it's not a very professional thing to do. In the lead up to starting on that response, I had seen a lot of videos arguing against Anita, and in them the creators also took a similar tone. Not necessarily saying the same things I did, but they also had an unprofessional attitude which involved insults, shouting, and patronizing behavior amongst many other things of that sort. And admittedly, that did have an influence on my attitude when writing the script and recording it. My view on Anita and feminist frequency in general also came from me learning about some of the more controversial and toxic things that they've done. For instance, I found out that one of the writers for the videos attacked Shigeru Miyamoto and Hideo Kojima over Twitter by calling them sexist, which also affected my view on the whole situation to be one motivated more so by anger rather than a feeling of disagreement, which obviously came out in the video. So then after I uploaded the video, I quickly saw the errors in the way I acted and felt that it wasn't much of my place to act in that sort of manner since Anita's never done anything to me personally, and in the videos themselves, she does honestly act in a professional and respectful manner for the most part, so it doesn't even fall under my creed of giving toxic people a taste of their own medicine. Plus, I even said in the video that I did not condone her receiving death and rape threats, but my behavior didn't really help that, as if anything, it kind of encouraged more of that. This played a big part in my changing attitude for response videos, which I covered in the Doctor Who film theory response, and why for the second response I made to Anita I avoided doing stuff like that. This is one of the prime reasons as to why I wish that I could go back in time and redo all my older responses so that I could prevent people from being abused, and also so that I would never have been influenced by people who I later realized to be highly toxic. Corrin cross Azura. This is probably the most embarrassing mistake I have ever made on this entire channel, just because of all the disgusting connotations it brings. In my Fire Emblem Fates pairing video, I said that I really liked the pairing idea between Corrin and Azura, as it was the pairing I gave to Corrin in the game, with me even saying that it was my headcanon. However, not too long after I uploaded the video, people started commenting that Corrin and Azura are actually cousins, and thus I was creating an incest pairing. This confused me at first, as I did not recall this being said in Birthright or Conquest, so I looked up Azura on the Fire Emblem Wiki, where it straight up says that she and Corrin are cousins, and that their mothers were sisters. This is stated in-game in Revelations, where Corrin and Azura's true origins are revealed. How did I not know this? I actually have not played Revelations! I never got around to playing because of how long it's taken me just to beat one version of Fates, let alone both Birthright and Conquest, which I planned to finish before getting Revelations, and then Echoes came out, which put the whole plan in jeopardy. I wanted to keep this quiet because I thought it would be embarrassing for me to make a video on Fates and say I hadn't played all versions. How ironic, as it's exactly what caused me to make such a massive error. I don't know why Nintendo and Intelligent Systems allowed you to pair them up knowing this, and, of course, they have to make their romantic interaction so fucking cute as if to rub it in my face. I guess having female Corrin as the canon version makes a whole lot more sense now. Never make a mistake, anything that reminds me of it I feel really ashamed about. So, whenever I hear about incest or jokes about rednecks having sex with their cousins, I instantly think of this whole situation. I retract my statement of Corrin and Azura being my headcanon, and instead I shall go with Camilla since she's the one I'd like to bang the most. They may be step-siblings, but at least they're not blood-related. And do you want to know the worst part about this era? Because I didn't know this, and thus didn't bring it up, some people now think that I'm pro-incest. Now, for this final mistake, which I consider to be the biggest out of all the ones on this list, yes, even more than Corrin cross Azura, but this is a mistake, as far as I'm aware, nobody has noticed, and it has occurred across a ton of my videos. So while this isn't as embarrassing as Corrin and Azura, it's something that really bothers me on a personal level, which is why I decided to make it number 1. Using American pronunciations. This has plagued me for so long in my personal life due to my upbringing, and it has seeped into YouTube as well. As I'd hope that a lot of people watching this video would know, there are many words in the English language that have different pronunciations depending on if it's American English or British English. However, for a lot of words I have said on this channel, I've been using the wrong version. I've been using the American pronunciation when in actuality I should be using the British ones. Just to give some examples, for words ending in ARY, ERY, and ORY, with some exceptions like summary, the letter before the RY is silent.
The legendary.
And this also applies to the plural of these words. There's also things like saying status rather than status, and Z instead of Z. There are various other examples, but I don't want to turn this video into an English lesson. The root of this whole situation came from me watching many TV shows that were made in America as a kid, in which I constantly heard these pronunciations. This continued into my teenage years where most of the YouTubers that I watch are American, and it got to the point where I actually heard the American pronunciations of these words more than the British ones, so I legitimately thought that's how I was supposed to say them at the time. It also doesn't help that some people mock me for using British pronunciations by acting like I'm saying them wrong and treating me as if I'm stupid. This bothers me so much on a personal level because, if you couldn't tell, I am English.
You're English?
I've only been to America for 2 weeks of my entire life, and I'm also part Scottish and part Welsh. It's just that a lot of people don't think I'm British because of my voice, and even offline, people think I'm American and ask me where I'm from. It's just that one of the symptoms of autism I suffer from is a lack of an accent. Yes, I'm being serious. I know it sounds far-fetched, but it's what I've actually been told by doctors, when in reality, I should have a Geordie accent. Since learning of this mistake, I have tried to switch to the British pronunciations, and it's worked for the most part. The only recurring one I don't use is saying things like master or half, because they're less prevalent in the northeast of England where I live, and because I don't want to sound like a posh snob. But it's still something that I beat myself up over because people thinking I'm American has honestly pissed me off since its inception when I started high school, as most of you will know it as. And doing this has not helped whatsoever. It's made it worse.